Hey, I'm Chris Smollett, 2015 winner of Kids Write for Kids, and also the author of Escape from the Taco Shop. And I'm here with Ripple Foundation to interview accomplished and proud Canadian author Dorris Heffron, who was the pioneer for young adult literature genre. Hey Doris.
Hello, Chris.
Hey, thank you so much for having us over to interview you.
It's a big pleasure for me.
I'd like to come to talk to you about your latest book, City Wolves, and also on just general questions like how you got started as a writer. How does your workspace influence how you write?
Well, I want to first tell you that every writer is different, but I think most of us need what I need, and that is a table to put my computer on and be able to close the door. Some people can write in cafes, but I can't.
Oh, okay.
So it has to be that. And in the early days when I was young and starting out, I couldn't afford a desk, so I always had some kind of table from a second-hand shop or something. But table, closed door, get to work.
Oh, okay. So, other than that, does the outside setting matter to you on whether you're outdoors or in the country or in the city? As long as it's silence inside, then you're okay?
Yeah, I mean, if you're starting to fuss over, I hear noises outside, or I see people, or, oh, these cows are so beautiful, I need to look at them all the time instead of work. No, you have to really focus. It's like going into an exam.
Oh, okay.
And they can put you in an exam room in all kinds of conditions. And you have to just block it all out and focus and get into the world that you're trying to create.
Okay.
Kind of no excuses.
Yeah. How did you originally become published? And is it tough to be a recognized author in society?
Oh, those are two really big questions. I think you've heard, and it's very common, and this is what you should expect, that you write your first book and go through all the revisions, make it the best thing you can yourself, and then you submit it to where you hope it will be published. And I always start at the top and work my way down. Now, I had the extraordinary good fortune of, I was living in Oxford. I'm born and raised in Canada. That's a new, big, prestigious community. And I just thought, well, I want the biggest and best that has a branch plant in Canada, so that when this company publishes my book, it will also be published in Canada. So Macmillan of London was the obvious one for that. They have a long-standing, wonderful reputation, and they had a big branch plant in Canada. This was 1970. And so I submitted it to the biggest and best, and I also submitted it to a very renowned agency, which people in Oxford had recommended to me, and both accepted it. And that is so unusual. Like, do not expect that. Since then, when I came back home and I wanted to work directly with Canadian publishers, I had some rejections, and that's what you should expect, is lots of rejections, and you just keep submitting until you get the right one.
And how much of writing a novel is solitary work? Or how much of researching a novel is going outside and outdoors, especially in today's world with the internet as available as it is?
Oh, gosh. Well, my research has been different for each book because each book is different. For my first one, I didn't have to go anywhere because it's set in Kingston, where I went to university, and in Toronto, which I knew very well, in Yorkville in the hippie scene, which I knew, And when all my novels include at least one Indigenous character, and in A Nice Fire and Some Moon Pennies, my first novel, character in there is Continetta Horn, who was famous at the time, and she was from the Mohawk Reserve outside of Montreal, which eventually became involved in the Oka crisis. But anyway, I did have to know more about her, so I had to write home. Now it's all different. I think you can look up a lot of things on the internet, and for instance, when I did City Wolves, which is my recent novel, I went to the Yukon with my first Malamute, Yukon Sally, and I wanted to learn about the origins of our sled dogs. And that's where the sled dogs have the two important races, the Iditarod and the Yukon Quest. So I went there, and having an Alaskan Malamute, which is our Canadian Indigenous sled dog, opened doors for me in a way that I wouldn't have been able to get in to talk to people like breeders and mushers if I didn't have that dog, because there are so many writers who are bugging people everywhere, and they all think they're the greatest writer in the world and everyone should talk to them. And people in the Yukon are bored with writers, but because Yukon Sally was such an impressive Malamute, I got in and talked to any breeder I wished to, and so that was wonderful. And then I had to learn about the history of the veterinary profession, so then I did a lot of research in books, and I'm just not good yet at looking things up online, and I don't trust it because I'm raised in the library system. So I did book research on that and talking to people.
Oh, okay.
And well, I think that's enough. I go out of the house, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
And writing is solitary. Yeah, it is.
Okay. Have you ever thought about changing your genre for adult novels, or writing about something completely new? Like, for instance, writing a completely fiction book on maybe fantasy or science fiction or something like that?
I have always done realistic fiction, and I always will. The sources for my novels, and I know that's what everyone generally wants to know first, like where do you get your ideas? And mine have always been from some event that I've seen and know about, or something that has happened to someone, and I'm very interested. I like people and I find them interesting. So I'm always writing about real people, but it's always got some larger perspective. There's some kind of, this is making history, or this is telling you about history. And City Wolves is an historical novel, so it tells you about the Klondike Gold Rush, the first woman veterinarian, and how wolves became sled dogs. So those are my sources. It's in reality. And yes, I have changed, but not from, it actually is from a genre, because I started out writing novels about teenagers. And after a time, it became so difficult to write what I wanted to, that after my third one, I decided that's enough, and I want to write about the whole range of people and be able and free to focus on the whole range of reality. So then I turned to writing what is called adult novels. But the young adult novels is the history, and the things I did there is quite interesting if you want to ask me about that. But maybe a little further on.
Yeah. First though, because I am really curious about this, do you have any deadlines for your publishing agency?
Yeah. I take too long between books. I wish actually that I had done some maybe creative writing course or journalism is what I thought of to make me work to deadlines better. And when I was at university, and after first year, I applied to work at the Toronto Star, and I didn't get the job. So, I didn't get any journalism. And I want to say that my friends and colleagues who write novels and have done journalism are much more productive because they're used to just work till you get that done, and it has to be done by the end of this year or, such and such a month. And I haven't had to do that. So my deadlines are self-imposed. And for instance, the novel that I'm working on now, I want that completed by June. And so deadlines are important. And in a way it's easier if they're set by someone else. If your publisher says, look, we have to have this by the end of the year. But I don't think you could get Alice Munro to do that. She needs all the time that she needs. And I, fortunately, have been able to work like that. But if you're given a deadline, that's probably a good thing when you're young. Yeah, learn to meet those deadlines. They're good for you.
Sounds good. And do you prefer to read the same types of books that you write?
I do indeed. Like most writers, I loved reading from an early age, and so I was not raised in a household with a library full of books and stuff. My parents did not go to university. They were very intelligent, but fairly interesting reasons. We were pretty poor when I was growing up. And when I was 7 years old and really into reading, at that time we were living in 2 rooms in the top of a friend's house in the countryside, and I was going to a school that was 8 grades in 1 room. I mean, it sounds like Little House on the Prairie. So anyway, I naturally went for books that were realistic, though I did love a whole series of books by someone called Thornton Burgess that were about Paddy the Beaver and Thingy the Jay, and they all had names and they were talking animals. But that's as far as fantasy went with me, because I tried to read Alice in Wonderland, and I just found it stupid. Pardon me, but I did. And I just never could get interested in books that are in fantasy lands. And I don't want to say they're not good books, but it's just has never interested me, and it still doesn't. And I haven't read Harry Potter, but I have all respect for it. But I just, magic wands, I know that we can't have a magic wand in life, so I want stories that tell me about life and how to deal with life. And so that's why I stick to the realistic.
All right. On that note, what are some of your favorite authors, or some of the favorite books that you've read?
Let's see, I think you're asking about when I was younger and what really influenced me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So when I was young, I preferred the realistic, and about that time when, I was 9 going on 10, and there was a bicycle decorating contest, and my father, who was not good at keeping jobs, was good at decorating bicycles, and I won it, and the prize was Lucy Maud Montgomery's Anne of Green Gables. So I read that, and I loved it. And then I went to our local library, and I got every book of Lucy Maud Montgomery's. I read them all. And then I looked for more novels about young people, really novels about teenagers that were realistic, and there just weren't at that time. That was in the, late 50s or so, or the 50s, 60s, I can't remember. But there just weren't. And so I said to myself, well, I know I want to be a writer. I know I want to write. So here's the kind of novel I'm going to write. I'm going to write realistic novels about teenagers because there's a need for it. And therefore I'll be doing something that's needed. And I always like to do something that's needed. And I followed that. My first novel was a novel about teenagers.
Okay. And I know in your latest book, City Wolves, it was based off of your dog, Yukon Sally, right?
She inspired me, and usually it's people that inspire my writing, but definitely that dog so fascinated me. I wanted to know how she became a dog because she was so wolf-like. And I was used to real dogs, proper dogs. I mean, they're all real, but proper dogs that, act on obedience, and they love to please you, and they follow you around. And so yes, she inspired, and it just went, one thing led to another. And
Okay.
yeah.
Were any other books influenced by any pets or people around you, or?
Not the pets, no. That's the only one that it was the animal that I was so intrigued by, looking at the history of that, which led to others. My others are people and events. For instance, in A Shark in the House, I had a friend in Oxford who was quite unusual. He was a graduate student like the rest of us. And he got his friend, who was a well-known sculptor, to create a sculpture of a shark that was as big as, taller than, a normal room like this. And with great fanfare and publicity, he had it brought down the street in Oxford and launched into the roof of his house. And that became the title of my novel, A Shark in the House. And so it was writing about him, and writing about a terrible tragedy that happened in my neighborhood. So it's always, and in that book also I write about the Canadian literati, and I don't like to abuse or use the people around me, and my biggest difficulty always is trying to disguise and protect the people so that they're not, or they don't get mad at me. That's the thing, get really mad at me. So no, it's always been people.
Oh, okay.
And events.